been playing the Nintendo Switch 2 for the past month and I've really been enjoying it. This console feels like a really strong successor to the Nintendo Switch, with several issues with the Switch being fixed on the Switch 2. So today, I've gathered 10 reasons I love the Nintendo Switch 2, from tiny upgrades to really satisfying controllers. So make sure to stay tuned for the full video because I've gathered a lot of major things that I love about the Switch 2, but also some little things that I've found really nice. So let's jump right into point number 1. The first reason I love the Nintendo Switch 2 is because of the larger size compared to the Nintendo Switch. Now, while the comfort of the Nintendo Switch 2 being larger and the bigger screen are really nice, I think the biggest winner here are the larger Joy-Con 2s. When you play with the Joy-Con 2s on their side, they just feel so much more natural than they did on the Switch 1. The Switch 1 Joy-Cons just felt so weird because they were so small. They felt like they just needed to be a little bit bigger to make sense as a realistic playstyle. But with the Joy-Con 2s, it feels like the little bit of extra size that is there for you to use really helps it as a playstyle that I would actually use. If I was playing in tabletop mode and I only had my 2 Joy-Cons with, I might actually play with a friend like this. And while we're on the subject of larger Joy-Cons, my second point on why I love the Nintendo Switch 2 is the larger SL and SR buttons. The Switch 1 Joy-Cons SL and SR buttons just felt painful to press. Those buttons did not press well at all. It felt like you had to push really hard to actually get them to press. And in games like Mario Kart where you need to use these SL and SR buttons quite frequently, it's just not an ideal experience. But thankfully with the Nintendo Switch 2, the SL and SR buttons are not only larger, but they press a lot easier than the SL and SR buttons on the Switch 1, so playing games like Mario Kart actually feels okay when you are using the Joy-Con 2s. Alright, moving on to the third thing I really like about the Switch 2 is the premium feel of the console and even the accessories. So the Switch 1 had a nice plastic around it. It didn't feel bad, it felt just okay, but it wore down pretty fast. It didn't feel new forever. But the Switch 2 has this really high quality plastic that is just kind of encasing everything, not just the console, but also the accessories like the Pro Controller. Now, obviously the Switch 2's only been out for a month, so we don't know if it'll wear down, but it really looks like one of those materials that lasts a lot longer, and when you get a Switch 2, you will be pretty satisfied right out of the box. It's just like one of those things, you open it up and you instantly like it. The fourth reason I really love the Switch 2 is the larger but still really good quality kickstand. Now, anybody who owned the standard original Nintendo Switch and had that tiny little kickstand, you probably know that this thing broke off after a lot of use. It only had one angle, it just did not stay on, it was a piece of garbage. And with the Nintendo Switch OLED, Nintendo thankfully fixed the stand, but it still wasn't great because it's kinda hard to pull out. You have to grip it from the bottom, and you have to move it from the bottom, so you basically have to pick the system up to adjust it well. But with the Switch 2, there's now this U-shaped stand, and while the stand does not look like it's super high quality, it actually functions really well. It's a piece of metal, so you have the peace of mind that it's not really gonna break, and it's even better than the Switch OLED stand, since you can adjust it a lot easier by actually sticking your fingers in from over to kind of pull it out more. It's just a lot nicer, but it doesn't sacrifice any quality that was in the Switch OLED stand. Point number 5 of why I love the Nintendo Switch 2 are the magnetic Joy-Cons. Now, if you had an original Nintendo Switch and you used that thing for a couple of years, the piece of plastic that holds the Joy-Cons on kinda wears down after a while, to where the Joy-Cons will slide off of the system without you even pressing the release button. But with the Nintendo Switch 2, instead of the controller sliding up where gravity pulls the system down and they just kind of slide off without you pressing the button, the magnetic Joy-Cons are attached inwards to the system, so they don't slide off or accidentally fall off because strong magnets hold them onto the system. It works so well that it doesn't even feel like the controllers detach, but if you do pull them really hard or push the release button, they do come off. But if you drop the Switch 2 or something like that, they are not going to fall off unless you are intentionally pulling at them or pressing the release button. I've also found that the Joy-Con 2s are really fun to play with. Just snapping them on and snapping them off, it feels so nice, it feels so natural. I'm so glad Nintendo did it this way because it just feels perfect. Honestly, I could probably play with these magnetic Joy-Cons for hours on their own. Before we get into the 6th reason I love the Switch 2, if you've been watching up to this point in the video, I would really appreciate if you would consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. If you enjoy my content, it really helps me out. The 6th reason I really love the Switch 2 is Game Chat. Now, Game Chat kind of felt underwhelming or unexciting, but Nintendo was really trying to push it as the next big thing that they are doing. Nintendo made like 2 different trailers, and both of them were several minutes long. One of them showcased Game Chat, and one of them just showed people having fun using it. And when you're using Game Chat, it really does seem like Nintendo put some real effort into making this service work really well. So first of all, I've been able to try out Game Chat a couple of times with Epic E3G. His channel link is in the description. He makes really good content. And neither of us have had any issues using Game Chat. It's worked really well. First of all, the microphone that's built into the Switch 2 really surprised me. While it doesn't sound like it's a professional quality microphone, it sounds really good for being this teeny little mic that seems like it was kind of something Nintendo added because they could. Neither Epic E3G or myself have had any issues hearing each other. Now, you do sound a little bit more distant when you are using it in docked mode, but you can still hear really well for that tiny little microphone, so Nintendo really surprised me on this one. Game Chat just works really well. The only issue I've had with it is the screen sharing quality looks atrocious, but at least Nintendo was honest about it. In the trailers, they were showing the laggy footage or the really low resolution footage. It looks just like that when you're actually using Game Chat, but like I said, Nintendo was honest about it, so I really can't gripe too much about this. The next reason I love the Nintendo Switch 2 is the game card slot. Now, a lot of people think that it's weird that it opens from the back the way it does, but I actually really like it. I feel like it feels more natural and just a lot easier to do than to get your thumb and turn it and open it from the front. And the game card slot is definitely a big improvement from the Switch 1 OLED game card slot, which didn't even have a finger slot, so you had to drag your fingernail under there, but there wasn't really a good slot to pull it up, so it could be kind of difficult sometimes. But the Switch 2 opening from the back, I really like it, and they got the notch back, so you can easily pull it out if you have shorter fingernails. The 8th thing I love about the Nintendo Switch 2 are the longer ZL and ZR buttons. Now, my reasoning is not the easiest to describe, but I'll try to explain it the best I can. The Switch 1 ZL and ZR buttons that were on the Joy-Con felt kind of short. They didn't pour over the edge like the Switch 2 does. So your fingers kind of hit that edge and it felt a little weird on your fingers, but the Switch 2 actually has these ZL and ZR buttons pouring over the side, so your fingers naturally rest on them and it doesn't really feel off. And this feels so much nicer than the Switch 1 ZL and ZR buttons. Now, it's not something you're going to notice until you use the Switch 2 and go back to the Switch 1 buttons, but it's just something that I've noticed is quite a bit nicer, even though it's not a super big deal. The 9th reason I love the Switch 2 is the Switch 2 Pro Controller. Now, I did make a review short the other day on why I really like this controller, but I really can't stop raving about it because it feels so incredible. The Switch 1 Pro Controller was a great controller, and I do think it was one of the best controllers on the market at the time until the Switch 2 Pro Controller came along. This new controller literally improves like every single thing wrong with the Switch 1 Pro Controller. First of all, there was a gloss finish along the top of the Switch 1 Pro Controller that scratched up really bad. It looked horrible after a little bit of use, since you're trying to get the cable in the USB-C port but you might miss, and it just hits that gloss, and gloss just scratches really easily. But the Switch 2 Pro controller has put a matte finish all around the controller, and it's actually the same matte finish around the Switch 2, so it still has that premium feel that I described earlier. The buttons also feel so much nicer. They are a lot quieter to press. The minus and plus buttons are also the easier kind of buttons that are more mushy rather than pressing hard where it just doesn't feel that natural. The control sticks feel like literal butter to move around. The D-pad feels so much better. There's a game chat button now, so it's better than the Switch 1 Pro for that reason. There's a headphone jack for those who need it. There are the GL and GR buttons on the back, which are programmable buttons, so you can map them to whatever buttons you want. And the button mappings can actually be customized for each game, so I could pop in Mario Kart World and program the GL and GR buttons to fit the ZL and ZR buttons, but then I could go into Zelda and program the GL and GR buttons to fit the X and Y buttons, and it'll save the mappings for each game, so you don't have to program them every time. And just all those tiny improvements really make this one of the best controllers that is on the market, if not the best. It just feels so incredible in the hands. So I would definitely recommend this controller, but I wouldn't have recommended it before I tried it. It's just something you gotta try to experience. And the 10th and final point why I love the Nintendo Switch 2 is just the refined experience. It feels like everything that was wrong with the Switch 1 has been fixed on the Switch 2. It just feels like Nintendo saw what was a good concept and they just homed in on it and really fixed it. There are just so many things that they fixed. The aforementioned Joy-Con stands so much better, the resolution and frame rate of the screen is far more stable, the build quality is so much more premium, the console is bigger, the kickstand is sturdier, the control sticks are larger, the buttons press better, the controller is easier to charge in tabletop with the top USB-C port. All of these things just combine to make a really rich and improved experience for handheld and docked players alike. But anyway guys, that's gonna do it for today's video. If there are any other reasons why you love the Nintendo Switch 2, let me know down in the comments, and I would really appreciate if you would like this video and subscribe to the channel. But anyway, thanks for watching and have a great day.